Deep breath, Blades. It is almost time. The Championship playoff final is this Saturday. Everything that the season's been building up to, and don't know if you're the same as me, but the nerves, they are a jangling in my belly right now. This is the Sheffield United way, and I am delighted today because I'm being joined by an absolute icon of coverage of the EFL. The originals who did the podcast better and before anybody else. And yeah, it's something I've been excited to do for a very, very long time. So I'm delighted to introduce my friend, Ali Maxwell. How are you doing, Ali?
Hi, Ollie. Yeah, I don't know about all that lovely praise, but I'm really excited. This is, it's a pleasure to come and join and jump on the channel and chat with you. I could do 50 appearances. I could do 50 podcast episodes this week because it's one of the best weeks of the year for me. And I love the playoff semi-finals, but it's all about what they lead to, and it's all about what the final means for the 6 clubs involved. So I personally feel really good about this Championship playoff final from a neutral's point of view. I think both from a context point of view and narrative point of view, but also I'm a big football nerd. I'm a big tactics guy. I think from that point of view as well, this should be a really fascinating game for people like me, and I'm sure a very nervy one for yourself and Blades fans.
Yeah, I'm certain that I'm not going to be able to enjoy any of that tactical battle. I like to think of myself as the tactics guy when we do the pod, and yet I know that come Saturday, none of that's going to matter. I'm just going to be sat there going, kick it long, score! So, I'll immediately forget. But before we go any further, not the top 20. Obviously, you've got a fantastic show coming up this summer in Sheffield. Why don't you tell everybody where they can get tickets and how they can come and see you at the Crucible?
Yeah, honestly, we would love to see as many people watching this come down and have a go at NTT20 Live. It's on the 5th of July, so it's a Saturday, and I'm going to say now it'll be a sunny Saturday. You might tell me that that's unlikely, but let's say a sunny Saturday, 5th of July, and it's a 3 p.m. kickoff as well. So, don't have to cancel any evening plans, but come along in the afternoon. George and I do Not the Top 20 podcast, and we love covering the Football League. We think the Football League is absolute class. And you know what? We've done one live show before, and it was in London. That's where we both live. That's where we're both from. But I kind of feel like, there's lots of London clubs in the EFL, but there's something about Sheffield, particularly right now with Blades and Wednesday being in the Championship, that feels like kind of the capital, in a way, of the Football League, and obviously so much history as well, and so much drama this season for the 2 clubs. So it feels like an amazing place for us to be. We're playing part of the Crossed Wires Festival, which is a weekend-long event with loads of different shows. So might as well check up the lineup. Might be something else to come and watch. But even if you just want to come and watch us, come spend a couple of hours reminiscing on what's been, as always, a crazy EFL season. We'll tell some of the best stories, maybe some of the stuff that hasn't been out there publicly as well. And we've got a few special guests up our sleeve. I think it's fair to say we're going to wait for the season to finish until we announce anyone in particular. But there should be something and someone really exciting for Blades fans to come and watch. So, it'd be great to see as many people down there as possible, because I think it's going to be really fun afternoon. And maybe, Ollie, you could let us know where we should be drinking afterwards, because we're staying over. We're going to have the whole evening. And we want to make the most of our time in Sheff.
Yeah, it's tantalising. That little drip feed there of the potential guests as well. I cannot wait to find out who it is that's going to be on stage with you. And not only am I intending to tell you where to go, I'm intending on being there, Ali. So
Good.
I think anybody who wants to come out, just say hi.
That'd be
I'm
great.
sure we'll be able to find the best way forward. So let's come on to this playoff final then, because you can look at it with a much more neutral head than I can. But before we get to the game itself, let's start with this season of EFL overall. Obviously, you cover it better than anybody else sort of has the opportunity to do. When you started this season, you had United 5th in your pre-season predictions. You then re-amended that in mid-season. You had us 3rd, got us absolutely spot on that we weren't going to be able to make the automatics. How have you viewed United this season overall? How has it felt like for you?
I always find, the weeks once the season finishes and once you get out of the week to week, the weeds of it and good form and poor form and ending the season well, ending the season poorly, all that sort of stuff. I actually really like being able to zoom out a little bit and reminding ourselves, like you have, of what we thought pre-season, and not just evaluating a club on how they ended the season and whether they fell away or whether they achieved what they wanted to achieve, but try and work out, what you thought pre-season, because that is really important in the wider context. And I think absolutely crucial when you look at this Sheffield United season, whatever happens on Saturday, because certainly of the 3 teams coming down, one of whom suffered double relegation, it was felt not just by us, but I think by most Championship observers that Sheffield United looked in the most difficult shape. I mean, people said the same about Burnley, though. With their turnover, it's often something that happens with teams coming down, is that you get the sense that there needs to be a lot of turnover in the squad. And when it came to Sheffield United as well, on the financial side, on the ownership side, where it always felt like there was something to be done, a takeover to be done, but it seemed like it was dragging its heels a little bit. All that sort of stuff just chucked up a picture of a club not necessarily ready to, pull their socks up and go and dominate a division. And yeah, you finished third, so maybe dominate a division is the wrong word for it, but 2 points per game picked up, more than, wasn't it? Really impressed, to be honest. Not quite as good as the top two, which is unfortunate, but many other seasons you would have finished second. Impressive in its own right, because things didn't feel too certain, and I think that Wilder and his personality were a big reason why Blades were able to start the season so well. And there will be some that say Wilder and his personality and the way that it kind of became the team's personality maybe led to the one wobble, right, at the worst time possible during April, where the other teams weren't doing such a thing. But overall, I'd say a team with really good character, that were very good at winning football matches in a lot of different ways, who were pretty good all over the pitch. Can't think of many massive weaknesses, to be honest. Some great moments, some great victories, and yeah, much better than I expected. So overall, definitely really, really impressed for sure.
Yeah, certainly. And I think, it's like you say, it's easy to look at it now when you've stepped back, because obviously after that wobble in April, I was as down as anybody. I was like, we've chucked it away. What have we done? But, like you say, stepping back, there is no shame in being beaten by Leeds and Burnley this season, is that they were just two teams who have done something in the Championship that not many teams get the chance to do in getting 100 points each. So certainly no shame in the way that we've fallen away. But what was it for you that was the standout for United? If you were picking one player who you thought, that's the guy around whom United have built this season, where did you think we had that sort of standout?
Yeah, I mean, starting in goal, I think Cooper, off the top of my head, it's hard to think of every single signing from last summer. But when I think about the obvious ones that stand out, particularly when it comes to value for money, him and Tanaka of Leeds are probably the ones that stand out most. Again, a bit like Sheffield United as a whole, I feel a bit bad for Cooper because, by his own standards, this season was absolutely sensational. Unfortunately, the greatest ever Championship goalkeeper season happened at Burnley with James Trafford, and with not just the clean sheets, but the save percentage and the consistency throughout the season. But I can't remember Cooper getting anything wrong, really. So, he's kind of the standout in the sense of a signing that, had some stepping up to do, had never played at the top end of the Championship before and absolutely did that. But I kind of think Burrows, to a certain extent, deserves a lot of praise, because I've been watching Burrows for quite a few years now, like a lot of Peterborough players. He racked up a lot of games at a really young age, and the sort of popular view of Burrows was that, his delivery's brilliant, and if football was played at walking pace, he'd be one of the best players because of what he can do with his left peg. But actually, as a fullback in a 4, is he good enough defensively? And will he be able to cope with, some much quicker and more skillful wingers in the Championship? And basically seems to have stepped up brilliantly. And I think the defensive questioning has almost vanished. Teams still target him, but I don't really feel like you can't say he's a weak spot. So I think those two have been super impressive. And then there's just players that I love to watch, like Harmer. Rak-Sakyi probably hasn't had as many moments as I would have hoped this season. O'Hare's been a sort of classic O'Hare season, which I love. And Peck, I guess, is one to bring up because, been told a lot about him previously, was potentially slightly in the shadow of Arblaster, who we really enjoyed at the start of the season. And then, I think people maybe take Peck a bit for granted. He's only 20. The responsibility that he has on the ball, his character, his temperament, his personality shines through at such a young age. Really tenacious, love the way he celebrates goals. So really been loving Peck in midfield. And I think it says a lot about his quality that, the recent switch to proper 4-4-2, really, one of the reasons that went out of fashion was because managers wanted more control in midfield. And with Vinny and with Peck, you probably have, in two players, a duo that can kind of do it all. And so you don't need that extra body there. So yeah, a couple of the players there that have really stood out to me. And I should say as well, really pleased that 𝗍𝗿 Campbell has been able to move away from Stoke, from a bad situation, just a club kind of floundering and not a great place for anyone to thrive over a long period of time. and a guy that I've always felt watching is, if nothing else, a fantastic finisher and someone who can normally get a shot off and normally hits the corners. And so many big moments from him, particularly early in the season, winning tight games for Sheffield United. So really pleased from his point of view, because after a couple of seasons of injury and just Stoke being so meh all the time, people start to question players like that. Oh, maybe he's not all that. Maybe he needs to drop down. No, he didn't drop down. He dropped up. And that's gone very well for him.
Yeah, and he's a fantastic player. I'm delighted for 𝗣𝗍𝗲 Campbell. Obviously, had so much go on as well over the summer. And so just fantastic to see him really come out this season and really sort of show us everything that he's about. And again, another player for whom it could be a really special day on Saturday if things can go the way that we hope. You're going to have to pretend that you hope to, Ali. That's all I'm asking from you today. Well, that brings us quite nicely. And so obviously we talked about United there and, our expectations for this season. But there are two teams that will be taken to the turf on Saturday. Sunderland. So obviously at the start of the season, you weren't quite as high on Sunderland in terms of where they are. But mid-season, you did specifically pick them out as your pick to potentially take that second automatic promotion spot when you weren't quite sure if it was going to be sustainable at Burnley. How do you view them in light of, well, I suppose particularly what's happened in the second half of the season and sort of their drop away, I suppose, after that defeat to Leeds in sort of mid-Feb?
Yeah, managed to get it wrong twice, didn't I, really? Because didn't see them being good at the start of the season and then didn't see them dropping off to quite that extent second half of the season. But, that's what it's all about, isn't it? No, look,
if you're going to have an opinion, it's always the way it's going to go. So I wouldn't blame yourself.
For sure. No, look, to start the season, just so much better than expected. It's a team that really, sacked off, half of the season last year when they sacked their manager and then they just never hired another one. And I just felt like that was a strange way to act, particularly if you're a club that's trying to develop so many young players, which is clearly their approach. And so I didn't believe in it. And I didn't know much about the new manager, which is fair enough. And he had just been relegated with Lorient. So again, you have to just hold your hands up and praise the appointment itself and the vision of the owners. And then how this new manager, 𝗍𝗍𝗫 has kind of adapted to the English game, because from the off, they were really good out of possession, really good defensively, held on to leads really well, like Blades at the start of the season. Found it really easy to win games once they went ahead, and that's a great quality to have. Yes. And they were doing enough going forward. I don't think they were ever absolutely sparkling, but they've got good players. They can play some nice stuff, and they just kind of found a way. And they had really sturdy underlying numbers, and that sort of stuff isn't for everyone. But when we're trying to cover 72 clubs, actually we find that understanding underlying performance data and what we think that kind of suggests about future performance, maybe more so than just pure results, it is really helpful for us normally. But when it came to Sunderland, their numbers were excellent in the second half of the season, and to me it felt like they had that level of consistency both at the back and going forward that I felt they would kind of keep pace. And then it was kind of alarming how quickly it dropped off. I do look back at their games against Burnley and Leeds in the first couple of months of the year where they were still in touching distance, where they were the better side at Turf Moor, no doubt about that, and they missed 2 penalties, and that game was a 0-0 draw. And at that point, Burnley hadn't started turning it on yet, and it felt really significant that Sunderland had clearly been the better side. No parachute payments at Sunderland, young team, and they were the better side that night. And you just wonder what might have happened had those penalties gone in, or just one of them. And then they played Leeds, and they took the lead at Ellen Road, and then lost in heartbreaking fashion with 2 late goals. And I think that probably just rocked them a bit. It meant that they were never going to finish in the top 2. They'd lost touch with Sheffield United as well. And then just a bizarre end to the season, wasn't it? Where it just felt like they were just kind of sitting around waiting for the playoffs. I felt like losing that kind of week-to-week consistency might be hard to turn the taps back on for the playoffs. But, I actually still think the jury is out whether they have or not, which I probably wouldn't say on a Sunderland podcast, but I might say on one of yours. Because the way that both of those legs played out, even though they scored 3 goals across the 2 ties, they barely created a chance, quite frankly. And when the ones that they did were, pure counter-attacking scenarios and a set-piece goal and a massive error. So not 100% sure that they have definitely turned the taps back on, but I do think the confidence that you gain from getting through a semi-final that was as tight as that and as hotly contested as that, I'm not saying for a moment they're coming into this undercooked. But, there's every reason for Sheffield United to be favourites and not to... Well, there's plenty to fear in the Sunderland team because, like Sheffield United, they've got some good players and at their best, they're a good team. But, I think there's Sheffield United are the favourites for the game, and rightly so, put it that way.
Yeah, I know. I was the same, and I don't say that lightly. Ali will know as well as anybody that my anxiety can get the better of me from time to time when I'm reflecting on United. But yeah, I was watching the Sunderland Coventry game, and you thought, watching it for 180 minutes, I did think, well, I think United, ultimately, we'd had a really good playoff semi-final performance ourselves. I like just throwing the stats in, the new championship record for the biggest playoff semi-final victory. It felt as though we were really building to something there, and we had these special scenes at full time where there was the tribute to George Baldock, Starman was playing, and it really was quite emotional in Bramall Lane. And I know I remember turning to my family that I sit with, and I sort of said to them, this is special, this feels different. And it felt as though that momentum, those special moments, were what were going to carry United forward. And then in the 122nd minute, I saw Dan Ballard fold himself up like a lawn chair and somehow direct a header into the top corner. I mean, how do you counter that kind of momentum that moment's going to have produced for Sunderland? And how did you feel, obviously, watching that? Even as a neutral, it felt like a really special moment for the playoffs, didn't it?
Well, I mean, it's a very on the nose question, because I was actually sitting here where I am now in my spare room, and I was on BBC Radio 5 live at the time, and it was me and Kelly Cates chatting about the playoffs while the game went on. But because 5 Live didn't have the rights to commentate live, it was Michael Brown and Chris Coles, the reporter team, were at the Stadium of Light. And obviously the whole show was just waiting for something to happen. And I was just basically filling time. Like, I don't know what I was talking about. It was about 10 p.m. But also because I don't have a TV up here, I was on Sky Go and I was actually behind. So I heard all the commotion and the corner had just been given and I was waiting for it to come in. So it was a bit of a weird one to experience, and probably not ideal, because actually the commentary, 𝗣𝗿𝗄𝐺, was brilliant and really let the fans kind of tell the story for 15, 20 seconds or so. We've got 𝗣𝗿𝗄𝐺 on the Not the Top 20 pod this week as part of our preview week, and I'm really excited to chat to him about that. But yeah, just look, impressed with them rousing themselves after conceding the equaliser to Coventry, because clearly they were on the back foot at that point. And that's where momentum, for me, I can't put too much importance on it. From a kind of match-to-match basis, from a heading into the playoffs basis, because one of the main features of momentum is that it comes and goes. It's not constant. If you have it, that doesn't mean you have it forever. And we see that time and time again in games, in championship games, and in championship games between two good teams who are well-matched. We see it all the time. And whoever takes the lead at Wembley, the other team will then be in the ascendancy. I'm absolutely sure of that. It's unlikely to be a clear and comfortable 2-goal win for either side. It's very rarely how it works. So I don't necessarily share the same fears that you would about them picking up some sort of momentum because they scored a late winner in the semi. Of course, it sent them to the final. They're playing against you and Coventry aren't, and that counts for something. And they'll have had great moments and great memories, and they'll be feeling like a real brotherhood right now because of it. But the boring answer is really that probably winning 6-0 over 2 legs is perfectly good preparation as well. And you finished the night before them. You didn't have the emotional stress and the physical stress of playing that many minutes and that long and having to go right to the end and defending your box for 210 minutes as they would have done plus change. So for me, that's probably more of a negative for them than them scoring a late winner is a positive, if that makes sense.
Perfect. That's exactly what I would hear. Calm me down. Just remind me of what the facts are. Remember that it is. That's exactly the kind of thing that we need to hear, and that I need to sort of keep me on the level before I let myself overrun too much with anxiety. Another point that I know you have strong feelings on, because I've heard you talk about it on the pod, and so again you might have to be the voice of reason. So I'm going to put some stats out for you, but I'm going to start with a definitive statement, or maybe two definitive statements. Sheffield United are cursed at Wembley and in the playoffs. It's been 100 years since our last win at Wembley. Obviously, it's United's 10th playoff campaign, and we've not won in any of them as yet. The quite fun stat is that I believe that over our 9 playoff campaigns so far, we've never been promoted, but have been relegated once. So lots
Incredible.
of good stuff that's really coming out of us. Does any of that matter? Is it just complete nonsense and fan superstition that I need to take out of my head?
I mean, it very clearly matters to you and to a lot of Sheffield United fans. Like, There's no argument there. George and I came and did part of the Sky Bet relay run. We ran from Bramall Lane to Hillsborough about a month ago. Whatever it was, 7.5K, and we were picked up and driven very kindly back into town by Sheffield United club employee, I think. It seemed like, I can't remember the guy's name. I feel bad about that, but he was like a club historian of some sorts. He was an old boy, and he was Sheffield United till he dies. And he told us, and I don't know if it was just bluster, but he told us that he wouldn't go to the final if Sheffield United got there. Now, that was a month ago. Things have changed since then. People say things that they don't mean. But I'd be fascinated to know if he is actually going or not, because his point was, as you said, he was like, look, I've been 10 times. I've never seen us win. I've done my time putting on coaches and organising and getting everyone up for it, getting everyone excited, and I've been let down too many times. So, and clearly from a neutral's point of view, it's just really hard to get your head around, because I said to him, like, look, is it not part of fandom and life, quite frankly, that things don't always happen the first time, and sometimes not the second time, and maybe not even the fifth time? But if you keep plugging away, and then when things do happen and you have lived so many bad experiences, surely that makes it an even greater feeling. So that's how I would look at it, but I understand that not everyone would agree. However, putting aside anything like that, I don't for a second believe that it has a huge impact on the actual result of the match. I know it sounds like a really tedious thing to say, but this match, it's a bit like spinning a roulette wheel for me, where you want to see patterns in, like, oh, there've been 4 reds in a row, so the next one will be black. But you cannot argue with the fact that every time you spin a roulette wheel, that is an isolated spin, an isolated incident, and it actually has nothing to do with what's happened before. So you can see patterns in stuff, but it really doesn't have anything to do with that. Now, clearly, football is played by humans, and there are emotions involved, and they do have an impact. But I do see it a little bit like that. I find it impossible to imagine that any Sheffield United player that steps onto the pitch at Wembley on Saturday, they might be nervous, and that might impact their performance. But if they are, I don't think it's because Sheffield United have got a bad record at Wembley. You might argue that some of the vibes from the fans can bleed into the team. I just find that hard to agree, to understand. They are professionals. They have been training for this. They've been playing all season as a team, and they will feel ready. They will feel excited, I think. That doesn't mean they will win. They might lose the game, even so. But I don't think that will be because of Sheffield United's Wembley curse. And I say this as someone who has said this very consistently, not just about Sheffield United, but Brentford spring to mind. Brentford fans said the same. They made the playoffs. They lost to Fulham, Scott Parker's Fulham. Joe Bryan scored a free kick. They went the next year. They had the worst playoff record of anyone ever, and then they won the playoffs. Sunderland, your opponents, they had a terrible playoff record, and then they won. And yes, that was League One, and they were playing against Wycombe, and they were stronger than them in most areas. But this stuff, it'll be, if you played in the next 5 playoffs, you definitely win one, and then the curse would be over. So, part of the problem is it doesn't come around very often. So when it does, you make a big deal out of it.
Yeah, we keep finishing second, so we don't have the opportunity to do it. That's what's really holding us back from breaking the curse. So, onto the game itself then, and the final. What do you see as being those? So I've picked out 2 key battles, I think, that I see as being where this game is going to be won. And I think obviously part of it depends on Sunderland's sort of formation, because we can't be certain of how they're going to go. But the 2 areas that I've picked out as being key for me is 𝗤𝗄𝗎 against 𝗍𝗿𝗏 and Enzo Le Fay against 𝗤𝗍𝗄𝐻 𝗍, assuming Le Fay moves back into the centre of Sunderland's midfield rather than being stuck out on the left. What do you see as being that sort of key battles in this one? Do you think I've got that right, or is there other areas that you might pick at and think, actually, this is where I'd have my eye?
Yeah, I mean, because, the Le Fay off the left or as the 10 is really interesting, because I've been waiting for him to play as a number 10. Maybe we just needed to wait for Mundell to be back and fit, which he sort of is now. I mean, only off the bench so far, but they might decide that he plays the first hour and he's an important player for them. If he does, who can score a goal out of nothing, is really good 1v1. Maybe that means Le Fay moving to the middle. Part of me feels like playing an attacking unit that hasn't played together, maybe ever, because of various injuries, might be a bit of a risk. Mayenda and Isidore have been playing up front as a 2 in the last couple of weeks, and I'd say with pretty mixed results, but very clearly they are a massive counter-attacking threat. And because it's 4-4-2 against potentially 4-4-2, I think there's basically matchups in all 10 outfielders pretty much has a matchup. I assume that 𝗍𝗲𝗄 will try and pin himself on Luke O'Nien, who's about a foot shorter than him. So
I hope so.
I always think in those situations the striker has the advantage because Ballard can't just run out to the left side of the defence to man mark him, because that would just cause gaps in the defence. So I do expect Moore to stick himself to O'Nien, and that's a clear, should be an area advantage for Sheffield United. He should stay away from Ballard because clearly he's better in the air than O'Nien. But I think you're definitely right to highlight that. Something that Sheffield United will, I think from the very first minute, will try and make the most of. And I know that Big 𝗍𝗲𝗄 hasn't been electric in front of goal, but I think over the 2 semi-finals we saw that even if he's not scoring, probably what he brings to the team that none of your other attackers, and you've got a lot of them, none of the others can really bring, I think makes him a really key player. I like the 𝗍𝗵𝗏 versus Bellingham midfield battle, because Sousa and Neil are the 2 more senior players in the midfield battle, and different kind of players, but Bellingham gets all the hype, doesn't he? And
he does.
for very good reason, because he's an incredible young player. And I feel like 𝗍𝗵𝗏 maybe in the context of 𝗤𝗏𝗏 wasn't getting that much hype pre-season, and maybe in the context of Bellingham being Bellingham hasn't got a huge amount of hype this season. But he's a 20-year-old who started almost every single game this season for a team that finished above Sunderland in the league table, and has just as much quality on the ball as Bellingham, if not maybe a little bit more in terms of his passing range. And Bellingham's got some pretty rare athletic qualities like his brother, but 𝗍𝗏𝗏's tenacious and dogged and got really good character and temperament as well. So I really like that as a battle, like from a neutral's point of view, and a kind of someone who's always trying to pick out the talents from the EFL that will go to the top of the game. For me, that's going to be a really great part of the game. I think I don't think it suits Sheffield United if they sit off you. I'm not sure that's when you're at your best. And that's not to say you can't break teams down, because that's also not true. But I wouldn't say it's when you're... I just think this is why as soon as you went 1-0 up against Bristol City, I was so comfortable that you'd cut loose, because on the break, any opportunity, with Harmer running things, 𝗍𝗏𝗏 with his forward passing, Sousa can carry it, and then, the wide attackers, the movement up top, it's just so hard to handle. So it would make sense in my eyes for Sunderland to try and avoid that issue by not committing too many men forward. And they've got fullbacks who they can get forward, Hume and Sirkin, but they'll probably stay at home. They'll probably make sure that they've got 4 back, so that they don't get caught out on that front. And that's going to be the question for you guys as well, is like, if that's the case, and if they're giving you the ball, how brave will you be committing men forward, like Burrows, for example, and the right back? To what extent will you push forward the fullbacks into the front line? To what extent will 𝗍𝗏𝗏, get forward? And if that's the case, are you ready to lose the ball? And will you be all right? And will Jack Robinson be all right with Mayenda bursting into the vacant gap where Burrows is? So I think there's a really interesting cat and mouse tactical battle. It might. My concern from a neutral point of view is, I think both teams will be mostly obsessed with not making a sloppy mistake and not opening themselves up. And that means the first half an hour might be pretty poor, and it might get to about an hour and it might still be 0-0, and we might still be going, there've been a few flashes, but nothing particularly clear cut. But I do have confidence that the game will open up towards the end. I do have confidence that it's not going to be like that for 120 minutes. There will be big moments. There will be gaps. There will be players coming off the bench who can impact the game at the top of the pitch. And I do think that there'll be a big finish to this game. That's my strongest sense.
Big finish. Obviously, I'm not sure my art can take a big finish. I think it could just be 3 up in 20 minutes. That'd be great. You've got to think that with United's bench and the players that we've maybe got to come on, your Ben Brereton Diaz, Jezrak Sake, Tom Cannon even, there's a lot of depth in United's team. So you think it's going to be a big finish. I'm going to push you, and you'll maybe tell me not to. Predictions. How do you see this one going? And don't let the fact that this is the Sheffield United way influence you in any way, shape or form, Alan.
Well, yeah, I am in a bit of a bind here because I've already recorded one show, Neutral's show, and
Yeah.
I did side with Sunderland. And I'll be honest, I'm kind of going
Back
against
yourself.
I kind of go against what I would normally do because I'm not normally someone that goes with like a feeling very much. But I do think the two teams are really well matched. I do think, even though there's quite a big points gap between the two teams in the regular season, I actually see them as pretty similar teams. I don't think there's very much between them. I think the strengths are in similar areas. I think the tactical systems mean that, for me, it's incredibly close. I do understand why Sheffield United are favourites, but I just have a feeling, and that's it. I can't really explain it any better than that, which isn't ideal for someone who thinks of themselves as someone who knows a lot about the EFL. The good news is, as discussed earlier, my predictions of Sunderland have been pretty poor all season, and so I'm sure this will be wrong as well. But I think I'm going to say 2-1 rather than 1-0, just because I want there to be more than one goal. But I think a 1-0 either way, and I'll pick Sunderland.
1-0 to Sunderland. Well, like you say, we got them wrong at the start of the season. We got them wrong at mid-season predictions. Let's hope one last time we've got them wrong in the playoff predictions. Yeah. Ali, thank you very much. Thank you very much to everybody at home as well for joining me here today. This is it. The last one. Off to Wembley. Off to the playoff final. It's got to be different this time. This is the year that we believe in it. This is the year that United are going to do it. I'll give you my prediction. I think we're going to win it. I think Ali is going to be wrong about Sunderland one last time. I think it's going to be 2-1 to the Blades.
Love it.
And I think this one's our year. One last game. 𝗍𝗲𝗷 𝗚𝗿𝗲𝗲𝗹.